We all tend to only seek and embrace the information that confirms what we already believe. This can be called closed-mindedness. This can be called whatever you want to call it. But the human brain just attaches itself to what it wants to believe and what it knows. You try to be aware of it when you see it. You try to question the source.
Welcome to the Up Your Average podcast, where Keith and Doug give no-nonsense advice to level up your life. So buckle up and listen closely to Up Your Average.
Talk to me, Doug. What do we need to know this week?
Well, what you need to know is who you need to know, and that's Don. Our good friend Don. Been friends with Don a long time. And Don is here to tell us everything he knows about life. He's here to tell us about math. He's here to tell us about cars, about cruises, about biases. And my favorite Don story, do you know what it is? You were with me, I think.
No, I don't. I've got good Don stories.
My favorite Don story was Don has a really great sense of humor, like a A-tier sense of humor. And it's so good that he even used it to buy one of his vehicles. He bought a Ford. What was that thing? A Crown? Was it a Crown? No.
Yeah, the LTD Crown Victoria, the white police cruiser.
Yeah, and it looked just like a white police cruiser. Did you have a license plate?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Had the thin blue line on the front.
That's right. And so Don and I and Keith, I don't know, I thought you were with us, but we're cruising into the Journey.
I do
Which is
remember
just
this.
like all you can eat buffet where a bunch of investors go for lunch. And Don is turning onto the road. There's a traffic light. There's cars coming. And Don holds his hand up like this to stop traffic as he's turning the Crown Vic on. And it just made my day. I giggled for a long time on that
You were
one.
hungry. I didn't want you to wait.
I appreciate that. So that's what's up, Keith.
It's a blast to have you here, Don.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
It's such a funny thing that, that one of the top things that we try to advocate with our clients is to think differently, because the crowd's always wrong is kind of our opinion. And we just know that you can bring that to our friends as we're chatting about it today. Thinking differently. How do you get caught in ruts in your thinking process? And then how can we take thinking differently and integrate it into financial planning ideas? And so that's what I'd say. Let's just kick it off in that direction.
So in relative terms, it's a new topic, behavioral finance. About 7 years ago, behavioral finance came on the scene, and the origin of it was what's called the Dalbar study. And the Dalbar study showed what investments did over recognizable time periods, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, et cetera. And then what the average investor got during that time period. And what we noticed was there's a behavioral gap. There's a gap between what the investor got and what the investment did over those time periods if the investor had just left them alone. And discovering that behavioral gap, we've come up with a bunch of different biases and some of the things that people do that are mistakes in the way they handle their investment. And what I've heard you and Doug do, which I don't hear many financial advisors doing, is apply these biases to their financial plans and how to think a little bit differently. And the first one I always like to talk about is the availability bias. And the availability bias says you tend to think about information that's available to you like you have more information than you actually have. The example I always like to use is 300 BC. There was a Greek astronomer called Somas that determined that the sun is stationary and the earth goes around it. 300 BC. It wasn't until 1600s that Galileo and Copernicus and Kepler figured this out as being real. So for 2,000 years, we didn't have that availability of that. And, you can think about some things in financial planning that work that way too. You always do what you've always heard, even though things change.
That's really kind of helpful for a lot of things. That your availability. A couple of ideas I was thinking about was in 1984 when I left college, I had a single credit card, Can you guess what it was?
Take a stab at a Visa. Diners Club?
None of those were available to a youngster then.
Interesting. Yeah.
Sears and Roebuck.
Yeah, that is a good example.
Because nobody had credit cards then. And I think, I don't know, Caleb, did they offer you credit cards in college? Yeah.
Oh, of course they do. Yeah. I want to get the audience. One that I think is really strong is one called anchoring. Anchoring jams up a lot of people. The example with anchoring is about 20 years ago, Williams-Sonoma made a bread maker and they put it in all the stores and it was $350 and that they didn't sell any. None of them moved. Somebody got a great idea of making a slightly smaller one with a few less features at half the price. Well, if you walk into a store, you don't know what a bread maker costs. You see a $400 one, then you see the $200 one below it. You say, I'm a smart consumer. I'm going to buy the $200 one. They were flying off the shelves. Restaurants use this today in their wine lists. Restaurants are notorious for this. They put the highest markup in the middle price range of the wine list. Because you walk in and say, I don't want to look like a cheapskate, but I don't want to spend the most expensive bottle. So I'm going to look in the middle. And again, you can apply this to planning because you take only the information that's available to you right in front of you and make decisions based on it. Here's one that we see everywhere in life. It's called confirmation bias. When I have a conversation with a group of people, I often joke and say, now, nobody answer this question, please. This is a rhetorical question. I don't want you to, as a matter of fact, put your hands underneath your legs because I don't want you to, oh, you guys are great.
I'm going to play along.
You tell me what network you get your news from, and I will tell you with remarkable accuracy who you voted for in the last election. Because we tend to, you could relax.
I could relax. Thank you.
Because we all tend to only seek and embrace the information that confirms what we already believe. This can be called closed-mindedness. This can be called whatever you want to call it. But the human brain just attaches itself to what it wants to believe and what it knows.
So what do you do?
Confirmation bias. You try to be aware of it when you see it. You try to question the source. You know, if you read studies based on certain pieces of information, you always want to know who's funding the study, who's paying for the information. And this gives you a chance to determine whether or not you're being open-minded or not, or whether you're only seeking the information that you're looking for.
I can remember I did a Bible study years ago that Keith had done earlier in his life. And I did that Bible study secretly to learn how Keith thought. And I can remember that study offending me, a Bible study offending me. You've done the study, the Roman study.
Yes, I have.
And I can remember it offending some of the religion out of me. And I say religion because it was repeated thought process that I'd kind of bought into over time. And that's the last time I remember being really offended of my thinking and my ideas. But it was really a healthy process.
It is healthy. And healthy is such a great word because the only way to overcome these is to be able to recognize them. There's another one that I like to talk about, and it's overconfidence. Take a room full of, you pick the group, student athletes, musicians, whatever it is, financial advisors at a seminar, and say, hey, who in this room's above average? Every hand goes up. This is sometimes called the grandeur bias or the overconfidence bias. And I don't know if we see it a lot in financial planning. I think this is one that we really don't run into much because people tend to be a little more conservative than maybe they have to. I know we were having a discussion about sequence of returns where the returns during the first portion of retirement are very important. Because if you have a drawdown in your first portion of your retirement, that really affects kind of the whole thing. But overconfidence is one that I think we all run into, and it kind of goes to a little bit of Monday morning quarterbacking, which is hindsight, which is another bias where you say, "Oh, I should have recognized this could happen, or I should have recognized that could happen," and you can't, right? Because there's too many variables. In fact, there's so many variables that pattern seeking is a bias. It's pattern seeking and recency bias kind of run hand in hand. Well, the last time I did this, that happened. Really, but the 20 times before that you did that, it didn't happen. But we tend to hang on to what happened most recently. And pattern seeking is a tough one in the business of investing and in the business of planning, because there's just too many variables. There's no way to really kind of determine the outcome.
So Don, you grew up in New York, like in the city, right?
Yeah.
And then you moved to Arizona?
I went to school in Arizona.
And you've lived here how long?
I've lived here longer than I've lived anywhere else. I've never been happier. I love it here.
And so
22 years.
Like when growing up in New York, would have you ever imagined that you'd see the world through a Hoosier's eyes?
I never would have been able to find it on a map.
Right.
If you gave me multiple choice. No,
so what has living here done for you?
But look at what you just did, Doug. You applied kind of pattern seeking in the variable to going from one part of the country that is incredibly geographically centric, right? New Yorkers don't think anything happens outside of the border of New York City until you get to maybe Los Angeles, right? To where the heck is Indiana? And I love it. Happy. And just think of how many different binary decisions go from the example that you used with me ended up in a cornfield to someone's retiring. How many single binary yes or no decisions are there? And can you possibly find a pattern in there? I suggest you cannot.
What I'm wondering, and this is probably going back to confirmation bias, is my perception of New York City is they are the smartest people on the planet.
Well, I would have to agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. Yeah, I'm kidding.
So during the COVID lockdown, I broke the rules, believe it or not. I drove into the city just to see what was going on. And it was mind-boggling to me what was going on in the city. I had a
let's remember that. Like, describe it, because that was a few years ago.
Yeah.
What was it like?
So I was judging New Yorkers by how stupid I thought they were as a Hoosier. And then I just, the world was starting to open up a little bit, and I was having lunch in Bloomington outdoors because they could have outdoors lunch. And this New Yorker started talking to me. And then my thoughts began thinking, maybe I need to rethink the New Yorkers. So I literally asked a friend to drive into the city. I think 2 weeks later, we were in the city. And I was just really humbled by the fact that the whole city was empty. Like
they were all gone or indoors.
Yeah, there must have been the high rises, but probably it took us from Times Square to the financial district. I don't think it took us more than 10 minutes to get all the way down.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Now look at what you just did. So in my opinion, everybody, and I know that's a term you should never use. There's no zeros or 100% in the universe, but the majority of us, safer. The majority of us either overreacted or underreacted to COVID. And I think where you lived in the country determined whether you were an overreactor or an underreactor. Why? Because they all watch the same news. Okay? They don't watch the same news in New York as we watch in Indiana, as they may be watching Chicago or Lexington, Kentucky. It doesn't matter. But it's information bias, it's confirmation bias, and it's, a number of things where you say, well, I'm gonna wear 2 masks instead of 1 mask, or I'm gonna wear my mask in my car alone, and whatever it was. But there's a lot of these biases that dictated our behavior during that time frame.
One of the ones that really affected me was probably 20 years before that was confirmation bias. I had an opinion of something that was going on in the U.S., and a friend of mine was pretty high up in the Pentagon. And so I told him my opinion, and we tend to be biased the same direction. And he told me that's not what happened at all. And I was like, well, my news deliverer told me that's what happened. And so I immediately turned off the news thing, because I'm like, well, if the one I think is right is not telling the truth, then probably none of them are telling the truth. And so it affected the way I processed life, even, because it's once you have that wake up call, it's like, oh, maybe the bias I have isn't true. Just like that study you went through, it changes the way we look at things.
And it is, and it's not an argument that I will have, because arguments, if you're going to start an argument, you want to seek an outcome. right? If you're going to start a disagreement or a back and forth with somebody, you really should have an idea where you want the conversation to end up or what you're trying to accomplish. That conversation about news media biases is unwinnable. And the way that I try to steer clear of it is someone will say, well, news media outlet A is fake. And if the other opposite side of that coin is news media outlet B, I'm going to say, well, they're all fake because they're all biased. You can watch the same news story on both outlets and come up with a different solution, a different spin. Look at the number that came out this morning. I can turn that into the unemployment number, of course. I can turn that into a positive conversation about the state of the environment, or someone else might be able to turn that into a negative conversation about job participation and things of this nature. Again, you have to drill down and say who's reporting and what's the agenda and what's the bias. And I think how I would apply this to financial planning is to just account for the unknown. Right? We had a conversation earlier. Again, I'm talking about sequence of returns. Is you just know, and there has to be a column for that in a financial plan.
I think a lot of these bias, when I was thinking about them, that really the best way to help yourself think through it is just the humility. Like pride says, I know what's right, and I'm right, and humility says, I might be wrong again.
It's overconfidence. We already talked about it.
A great way that I found is just have more friends.
Yeah.
And so if you have more friends, you have different types of thinkers, you have different ways that they were raised or grew up, and you get exposed, and your worldview can really change.
What about this, Don? This is a financial planning thing that really concerns me where we're at today. Just like only thing I had in the mid 80s was Sears credit card. People probably have more credit cards than they should today. They should. And Billy Walters, I don't know if you're familiar with him or not.
I am not.
Yeah. He gives you the formula for how he made hundreds of millions of dollars gambling. He gives it to you in this book. But what he also gives you in this book is why you should not gamble. Like if you go to Las Vegas and you just look at the skyline, it tells you I should not gamble.
Pretty clearly.
Yeah. And so what he says in there is that he only will take a bet if he has an edge on it. And he has Ivy League grads working in his computer room, putting the variables in. And so if somebody that was Caleb's peer was going to go out and bet $20 this weekend, they're betting their 20 against Billy.
Betting against him?
Well, like he's got the odds on his favor. And what they think is because they like the Colts, they know that what the Colts are going to do. Right?
I see.
You see what I'm saying?
Well, I think what you're describing is what we call asymmetric risk. An asymmetric risk is most easily described as trying to pick up dimes in front of a steamroller. And when you make a bet or make an investment or make a choice on something, does the upside equal the downside? More importantly, does the upside potentially outweigh the downside? There was a great quote, this going back longer than I really want to admit, from the head trader at Lehman Brothers at the time. His name was Ace Greenberg. And somebody was interviewing him. They said, Ace, what's the secret to trading a big book of business like you have? He said, don't lose money, right? And if you can't tell, I like to kind of boil things down into words that everybody can understand, like picking up a dime in front of a steamroller. The bad hurts more than the good helps. Meaning, if you lose 10% on an investment, on a blackjack table, to stick with your example, Keith, you have to make back, I think it's 13.5% to get back to break even. So the bad hurts more than the good helps. And I think it's important in a plan to account for asymmetric risk, right? Here's another one. I can't turn it off. Is the juice? How does that one go? Is the juice?
Oh, juice worth the squeeze.
That's it. Thank you.
So, Don, you're a math guy. I mean, you just whipped out the 13.5%. Like, was there a teacher early on? If we go in the Don time machine, was there a teacher who green lighted this kind of stuff that you remember? Someone that really said, "Hey, you're okay, man."
Doug, I didn't discover it till college.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't discover it. I didn't discover my interest in math until college. I really didn't.
What was it about your college that allowed you to discover that?
I was in aviation, and I was studying something that was interesting to me, right? It's human nature. We all had to have piano lessons as kids. And my father would come in the house and I'd be playing the piano and he'd say, "It sounds like the kids wearing oven mitts." And fast forward about 20 years ago, I started playing guitar and I love to play the guitar. And quite honestly, I'm good at it. I can play anything I want to play because I'm interested in it, right?
Okay, so that's where you go.
That's right. That's right. And that's why I didn't discover it until college.
Yeah.
Let me shift back to all the biases with that statement right there. Like one of the financial planning biases that struck me was that I think the time Caleb gets out of school, he's been told he has to do retirement. Like max your 401k, max your IRA, and nobody tells him to max his interests. Like find what you're passionate about and just go do that. Because if you do that, the money's going to take care of itself. But over the last 40 years, that's the primary thing that's been thrown out there to people. And I'm not saying neglect the finances, but you only have one life.
What are you interested in right now?
Wow, boy, that's a moving target. But to follow up on what you just said, I've heard you say that. I've heard you say that and telling me stories about your kids, your adult kids, your kind of in between childhood and adult. Make sure you're interested in what you're asking me to throw money at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tell you
and
what.
The reason why is because I will throw it at it. And I don't want to throw it at the wrong thing.
I know you will. I say it's a moving target, but I find what I'm discovering about artificial intelligence to be fascinating.
Okay.
I find I saw something recently that said something like 35% of Americans believe they have interacted with AI. 35% believe. How many do you think have?
I'd say 100.
It's pretty close.
Yeah.
It's pretty close. Now, don't forget you got your off the gridders.
Yeah, that's right.
But that would be great to have off the gritter on the podcast.
They may have even got it with their what do they call the chemtrails? They may have got those may have been operated by AI.
Yeah.
Do you pay for an AI service? Like are you subscribing to one?
No.
So how are you expressing your interest in it?
The awareness of the interactions. In other words, 12 months ago, if I said, tell me an example of you interacting with artificial intelligence, I would have given you an example that I was swiping groceries at the store over the scanner, and I was making two separate transactions because I was buying a couple bottles of St. Elmo cocktail sauce for a client in Nashville, Tennessee, because we could buy it in the grocery stores here and they can't. And I finished swiping the groceries that were for us, and I paid with my credit card. And the thing called over, help is on the way, right? Those words, you can all hear it, right? The thing sent over the person to check and put a red circle around the image of my cart that still had items in it. And I thought, that's AI. Isn't that amazing? Now, that was 12 months ago. Think about now. You and I were chatting earlier about you call Delta Airlines and the bot answer says, "Hi, I'm the bot. I'm going to be helping you." And I used to just hang up because the bot can't help me. First of all, it has trouble understanding me and my choices of words and my accent and everything else. But the bot helps now.
The bot's really good.
The bot's really good. And I think when you go back to thinking about how many car manufacturers there were just in the state of Indiana in the 30s. And then I go back to another kind of bane of, I'm sure your guys' existence as being financial advisors. Everybody wanted to talk about pot stocks in the early 2000s, right?
And recently.
And how do you know how many web browsers were there in 1995?
Right.
How do you know which one was going to be? And I think that's kind of what we're watching with AI is I hear investors all the time talking about the Fab Five, right? That drive the 80% of the returns in the S&P 500. And when you were growing up in the business, Keith, it was the Fab 40. Can you believe only 40% of the 40 stocks in the S&P? And people say, "Oh, it's going to be Nvidia and Motorola and Oracle." You can't make those. You can't make those decisions.
Yeah.
The only thing we know for sure is AI eats water and electricity. That's the only thing we know for sure.
Yeah, that's cool. So that's what you're exploring now.
Noticing. I'm not sure I'm exploring it because
Cal Fussman does a great job talking about AI. If you ever want a great podcast to listen to, Cal Fussman's Big Questions is a good one.
Well, I'm going to write that down because you know how much I drive, and I'm always looking for content.
What are you thinking when you're thinking about the AI for young people when they're looking to the future? Like, I know probably a year ago, the word was all these jobs are going to be eaten up by AI. But what do you think about somebody like Caleb, or maybe some of the tasks that he's doing today won't even be necessary a year from now? Do you see it as intimidating for young people, or do you see it opportunistic, or how do you view that?
Well, I see you have very expensive looking microphones, and I don't know how expensive your cameras.
Those microphones are the real deal. You know that. You're a
Well,
music guy. You know the Sures. That's the way to go.
I'm just going to have to take your word for it. But where I'm going with this is, I'm not a young guy, but what I do know about revolutions like this is it will cost jobs, but it will clear the path and open the door for quote unquote better jobs. What that means. It's a little bit scary about how some of the pay services, like Doug was pitching a few minutes ago, can actually give advice. And I think it's important, especially as an investor, when it comes to your financial plan, to realize where that advice is coming from. One of my favorite stories about market advice I got from a park ranger in a national park in Colorado, probably 35 years ago. What he said was, in the odd chance that you encounter a bear, the most important thing to remember is to resist the urge to run. And I didn't realize it at the time.
That's true.
But I was getting pretty good financial advice from the park ranger. And it takes us back to the numbers that everybody's seen. Over the past 10 years, it's been 2,500 trading days, right? 20 trading days a month times 10 years gets you to about 2,500 trading days. If you missed the top, how many days? Yeah, best 50. If you missed 50 out of those 2,500 days, your return went from 13% to minus 4%. 50 days out of 10 years. Watch this. 20 years, 5,000 trading days. Returns were 8.9% over 20 years. We're going to come back to that 8.9% number. If you missed the best 50, you not only didn't make 8.79, you lost 3.87.
Is that the S&P 500?
It is the S&P 500, which I'm glad you recognize that, and shame on me for not mentioning which one it was.
No shame, Don.
But the S&P isn't the be all end all. In fact, I think if you only invested in the S&P, you'd be committing financial planning malpractice. You have to be in other places. And I said we were going to come back to the 8% number. It's funny because some of the financial advisors that I talk to always talk about using that 8% as a kind of a guideline in the financial plan and kind of determine over a very long period of time. We know where an investor is today, and we can kind of calculate where that investor is going to be upon retirement based on using some of these guidelines, as long as the time period is long enough. And you know how many times since 1965 the S&P's done 8%? Exactly 3 times.
Okay, yeah.
So the financial advisors that I talk to use that number as kind of a guideline of what it's going to do over time. And look, I just showed you over 20 years it did 8.7, but it only hit that number 3 times. And that's, I think, what jams up a lot of investors is the volatility.
The volatility, though, seems as though that there's some type of bias that you work away from that with time. When your hairline matches mine, you tend to be more concerned about the volatility than when you're Caleb's age.
Recency bias, right? The last one really stunk. And when you look at a long-term track record of whatever market you want to discuss, whether it's the S&P or the NASDAQ or whatever it is, and you trick your mind from looking at the dates on the bottom axis, you can't find the last calamity, right? When you're living in it, when you're in the middle of it, recency bias, it seems traumatic. But when you look at a 20-year chart, you can't find it. And the story that I've heard some people tell is, think of that chart on the market and picture a child on an escalator playing with a yo-yo, right?
Yeah, most picture.
Most investors look at the yo-yo. Most professionals look at the child. So don't worry about the small, sometimes small, hopefully small periods of volatility.
Don, I cannot thank you enough for joining us. What else?
I got one more question for Don. I got one more question for Don.
You're going to bring it home.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to bring it home. You can do that. But Don, you've got a pretty cool ring right there. And I'm guessing at one time that was a mega interest for you. I don't even know what it says, but tell us about what that is and that interest that you have.
I got this from the hard way. This is the U.S. Marine Corps graduation ring. I was in the Marine Corps in 1986 to about 1988 when I got hurt in training. And it's been, it's probably the most important thing I ever did.
And so you were a young man, you had an interest in being a Marine.
It's genetic, Doug. All the men in my family fly planes.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
Yeah, I know we have.
I didn't know that's what that ring was for.
It's genetic.
I love that.
That's what you do. You graduate from high school and you either prepare for an aviation career, either in or out of the service.
Well, you follow your interests.
You follow your interests. And isn't it amazing how many young people's interests are outside of what they thought they once were?
Yeah.
Stated another way, how many of us are working in our majors?
Right.
From school. I'm certainly not.
So we're free to change.
I think free isn't a strong enough word. I think it's incumbent.
Right on.
Thanks for having me. I really did enjoy this. Thank you.
Don has been a great inspiration to us for a long time. I'd say that the whole podcast we have is really thankful to Don.
If someone wanted to find Don, how do they find?
I don't know, Don. How would they find you?
Through us?
Through you.
If you're interested in talking with Don, get a hold of me. Get a hold of Keith.
One thing I do want to say to your investors is I am actually a client of the firm. And I know an awful lot of financial advisors that kind of hang out in that circle. And I have appreciated very much your views and the way that you guys handle things and making sure that I'm on the right track to be where I'm getting. So I can't offer a higher endorsement.
Well, that's very kind. We really appreciate that kindness, Don. And we're honored to all of y'all that we've been able to say. And if you're a first-time viewer, be sure to go to gimbalfinancial.com because we would like to have your business as well. In the meantime, you guys have a great weekend and we'll see you soon.